Bill Stockert, and with our guests, Hadley Luddy and Terry Barron. Sorry, Terry Barron. All right. Okay. We'll start off right away with our guests from the, I'll give the Lower Cape Housing and ADU Resource Center. And we're really happy to have both Hadley and Terry here today. As Affordable Housing Committee members, we are thrilled that we have some long-range plans in place with Penrose and Governor Prince and 107 Main. But our concern for this meeting and for our future meetings is what are we doing in the meantime, and what else can we do to work on this, alleviating this crisis, maybe in small pieces as the larger pieces come into fruition. So hopefully today we will learn a little more about their organization and maybe how we can learn from what they're doing, maybe supplement what they're doing, or find out what else can be accomplished in a small way, like I said, while we wait for our big projects. So I will let you guys get started. Okay.
Carrie is on there.
Terry,
The microphone?
you're welcome.
Hi, Terry.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
And Marcia Algar is also with us via Zoom.
Great. Terry, do you want me to jump in and talk about the Resource Center, or do you want to start talking about the accessory dwelling unit component?
No, I'll let you please go ahead, and then I'll fill in afterwards.
Okay, great. And I actually brought materials to share with all of you and thought that we could leave these as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. To share with folks. Just to give you the big picture, the CDP, Community Development Partnership, and Homeless Prevention Council teamed up well more than a year ago to together go after some ARPA funding, which we were successfully able to receive thanks to the efforts of State Representative Sarah Peak. While we asked for $6 million, we've received $1 million, which actually, even though it wasn't the full amount, was, I think, the largest earmark that had been received in this region. So that was fairly exciting. And what we've done with that effort is to create the Lower Cape Housing and ADU Resource Center. So ADU obviously being accessory dwelling units, and Terry will speak to those. I would just focus on the fact that our collaboration together is to really focus both on housing development and really incentivizing and helping local homeowners in the lower 8 Cape towns from Harwich to Provincetown create accessory dwelling units and making that process as easy as possible. And then from the homeless prevention side, we are focused on a housing stabilization fund to support residents who are otherwise not eligible for many of the supports that are out there, that are either income requirements or people that may have already received support before and need additional support. And we are also going to be offering resident services, which is a service we currently offer to affordable and subsidized housing providers to really focus on stabilizing tenancy and making sure that people have the support to stay in place once they have housing. So that will be another feature offered to people as they create housing through this program. So Terry, do you want to speak to the ADU component?
Sure, thank you. And can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, yes, our portion of this is focused on encouraging homeowners to create accessory dwelling units in these 8 towns. Sorry, I don't know what happened to my camera. There we go. And so our thought behind this was that one of the things that keeps people from creating ADUs is the overall fear and hesitancy of not knowing how to move forward. And so our original intent was to basically hold the hands of homeowners that are interested through every step of the way. So our ADU Resource Center starts out with a homeowner, and does an intake and tries to find out, why they're interested in building an ADU and in what part of the home. And then we go out and we actually do a feasibility study to see if they have the septic capacity and whether they're in a zone that will allow it, whether they've got the square footage on the lot to accommodate an ADU, all of those things. And if they are eligible for an ADU with their property, then we help them find architects and contractors and funding resources, as well as letting them know if they're going to need a special permit and things like that. So we're trying to hold their hand every step of the way. Since we started this, we officially launched in April. We have had over 40 inquiries from people in the Lower and Outer Cape, which we are excited about. We have had 3 people from the town of Orleans, just so you're aware. 2 of them, unfortunately, did have some restrictions and are not able to move forward. One person did not have the square footage for their lot, the minimum square footage, and the other person just didn't have the upfront money to do a site survey and things like that. So, and then there's one person that is still moving forward in the process. So that's really our piece of it, and we're excited to have you, thinking about how you can assist us and homeowners who might be interested in building ADUs. So, and we have some ideas on that, but I don't know if you if you have specific
Did you mention the
questions.
financial assistance too, the amount that people receive?
Yes, I'm sorry, I should have. Yes, so we also have a $10,000 incentive for folks who are building a new ADU and are renting it on a year-round basis. And the criteria for that is to rent it year-round for a period of 5 years. And then that loan is it's no payment, no interest, and it's forgiven after that 5-year period. Our hope, quite honestly, had we gotten more ARPA money in the beginning, was to have a much larger incentive, because we know $10,000 doesn't go very far these days with construction costs. But that's all we could do, at least at this point. We're hoping to increase that, somewhere down the road.
Would you happen to know what the square footage was of that property that didn't meet the requirements? Would you happen to know
Off the
that?
top of my head, I don't, but here's what I can tell you, and it's what caused some frustration for the homeowner, is that their plan was they had a 2-car garage on the property already, and their plan was to take part of that garage and just turn it into an ADU. So they were not adding any square footage in terms of structure. But the way that the bylaws are written is that to build any ADU, even using your existing property, you have to have a minimum size lot, and that person was under that minimum. So I would have to go back and ask my coworker Vicky, who did the intake, exactly what that square footage was, and we could get that to you. But that was one of the challenges that she ran into, this homeowner.
I would like to know that information, because we've been talking back and forth about that ADU. Our bylaw has been changed a couple of times, trying to find the right fit for that. It seems to be a moving target, and it will be really helpful for us to sort of learn more about that piece.
Well,
Absolutely.
I think the bigger part is actually the septic. So
Part of it also.
the 4 requirements of the town of Orleans are 40,000 square feet, a Title V sign off from the Board of Health. The building can't be more than 800 square feet, and you can't, I forget what the 4th one is, sorry. So even if you have a 2-car garage, if you're adding an extra bedroom and you don't have the square footage, then it has to do with the nitrogen load of your septic.
I will confirm this for you. I believe that this homeowner had the septic capacity or was willing to give up 1 bedroom in their house to create this ADU, so septic would not have been a problem, but I'll confirm that.
Thank you.
You mentioned the subsidy of $10,000, but you also mentioned the other homeowner didn't have the funds for the site work. So that $10,000, that subsidy is only once it's approved and going to be built? Or is going to
Actually, it's after it's built, so they can
Oh, it's
show that they
after,
actually
okay.
are renting it on a
Okay.
year-round basis. And that is one of the things that we would love to figure out a solution for some of these homeowners, because we've run into this challenge with quite a few folks that we've done intakes with, to do a site survey and potentially have some plans drawn up, that's thousands of dollars. And that's before the homeowner even knows if they have to go for a special permit, that's before they even know if it'll be approved. So they could be out $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 by the time it's done, and then not have an ADU approved.
Right.
And a lot of these folks either aren't willing to put that money up, or most often they just don't have that kind of cash to do that. And so that's really, that's a struggle, and that's where we've been trying to figure out, how we can get some help with that. And we understand that, the towns are somewhat reluctant to do that as well, just because you don't want to put money up and then not have housing developed. So we certainly understand the challenge around that, but that is certainly one of the things that we're looking at. But any help that you can give us in terms of easing bylaws, easing permitting processes, any other incentives that you can put in on top of ours, even if it is at the end, like we're doing, because I'm sure that construction costs these days are averaging around $450 a square foot. So even a small unit is a lot of money to build. $10,000 doesn't even put a dent in that.
I wondered too, just to jump in quickly, Terry, about whether there's an opportunity, I believe the town of Provincetown does this, but any kind of a tax incentive for people that create an accessory dwelling unit and rent it year-round.
So.
Am I wrong about that?
No, you're not. But
Okay.
Orleans does not even offer the tax incentive that we have for residential year-round homeowners. And that's what it is that we give to people that rent year-round. So
That
what
would
you're
sound
talking
like-
about is the 25% residential exemption tax that the town of Provincetown does. Truro also does that, Wellfleet also does that, and they actually will offer that to homeowners that rent their house out year-round as well.
Yeah.
So if you're not living in the home, but you're providing that as a year-round rental, then you can be given that residential exemption as well, so.
It seems like a very good idea to look into,
Yeah, so
considering it's
that's-
being done.
That's
in-
usually done during the tax rate public hearings that are done in August. So the Board of Assessors would have to look at that, present that, and then present it to the Select Board. The Select Board would then have to look at it, approve it. And that's kind of already passed. So it would be
But there's one
something-
coming out, right?
That would be something that they'd have to do for next year. So we
Right,
do,
right.
like, the property tax rate is usually set in August.
Sure. I just wonder if it's something to look at for the next round. Anything we could do?
There has been some talk about that in the past couple of years, but nothing really decided, but it's something to bring up that we could talk about. I mean, in the town, there's been talk about it with the select board. I've heard it. So. Anyway, go ahead.
Hi, Terry. I believe that all of our different towns have different ADU bylaws, little tweaks here and there. And I'm assuming that as you go forward, you'll be able to make some recommendations about the bylaws in the different towns and the things that work well, the things that might need tweaking in each town. And I assume also, as you continue, you'll be putting together information about what are the challenges that you're discovering that we don't yet know about, which would be really helpful to know in terms of our future planning and what we can do to make it easier in our town. So if there's permitting issues in Orleans, for example, okay, how could we tweak our process to make it work better? Things like that. So I think one of the things I think that you are providing is a wonderful source of information about moving forward and how we can get better at making this program potentially be more viable than it might otherwise be. The other thing that I would really like for all of us to do is to be able to track the ADU units that we have in our town and in the Lower Cape in general. What part of our housing stock might be made up of these ADU units? And I know in Orleans, we've had our ADU zoning for decades, but there's not been a mechanism to actually track how many do we have, how are they functioning, is it going well, are there ways we could improve it? And as a town, I think we could do better with that, but with your recommendations, I think that would be also helpful too.
So one of the requirements in Orleans is you have to have at least a 90-day rental. So if the requirement is there, they should already be tracking it. Just remembered the fourth requirement.
That was it.
I actually think compared to other towns, Orleans is the most lenient.
Yes, actually.
And I think other than the possibility of looking at and evaluating the 40,000 square feet, especially if you're looking at a home that already has the septic capability and their willingness to give up a bedroom within the home, I would actually say it's one of the easiest, and I've looked at quite a few.
Yeah, I'll follow up on that because I believe that they did talk to someone in the town, and I don't know if it was the building department or someone, and essentially ran into a wall and stopped the process. But I'll get you that information. And yeah, back to your question, Fran, about sharing this information. Yes, we do track all of it. Any information that we get from anybody that's considering, we are tracking reasons why they're moving forward, not moving forward, and it's by town. So we can easily give you that information. And, I guess we would just want to know the best way to share that. And then the other thing that we are trying to do, I'm not sure who in this room attends these meetings, but when the CDP holds their quarterly peer group meetings, we're trying to share some of that as well, while all the towns are on there, so we can talk about what some towns are doing and others aren't. So yeah, and you're right that the minimum lease time is 90 days for Orleans, where most of the towns it's a 12-month requirement. I believe one other town has 6 months, but again, in our effort to try to create year-round housing, our incentive only kicks in if they're renting the ADU on a year-round basis.
We should also just point out that folks can go to the Lower Cape Housing Resource Center at lowercapehousing.org. And please, take the time to go and look at the website. We are updating it and adding pieces, including information for landlords, various educational pieces. I also wanted to put in a plug for anyone that does have a year-round rental or creates a year-round rental to be sure that you're getting that information to us via that resource page, because we can list your rental. And one of the challenges that people run into is trying to find a safe place to locate or even post, either find or post a potential rental. So this will be one of those places that folks can use to post a rental that's available. So we hope that people will take advantage of that. So please encourage people to look at that website.
That's a great addition.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the website, sorry, just really quickly, just to follow on to that, on the ADU piece of the website, there is a matrix that shows every town and, what some of the requirements are, minimum lot size, minimum lease amount, all of that. And we try to update that. We go back, at least every month or two and look at the bylaws, make sure nothing's changed. So I think it's pretty up to date. But that could also give you a great snapshot view of all 8 towns together.
And Terry, I was thinking we should put in a plug for, we've done a few of them, but there will be more upcoming information events at local libraries and various community gathering places for people to learn more about the program. So we hope that people will, join us when they can for that. So I wanted to just put in, and Terry, do you have any more to add about the ADU piece? I wanted to put in a plug for another idea.
No, please go ahead.
Okay, so I just thought I would share with you all some information about a rental assistance program. There are rental assistance programs now offered in many towns on the Cape, but from our perspective at HPC, we administer programs in Eastham and Wellfleet and Truro. I brought this example of the Truro flyer because I thought it would be worth taking a look at, just as another idea around how in the shorter term or near term, while we're looking at all of these housing developments that may take 5, 8, 10 years, and I know we're all cringing over that delay, right, or just the amount of time that it takes. This is one concrete way in which the town could be potentially helping to stabilize households. So the Truro program is the most recent that was developed. It was the most flexible so far that we've been able to work with the town to develop, where they were able to go up to 100% of AMI, which makes a big difference for eligibility. In Truro, they made it available both to people who are residents of the town, but also for people who work in the town. So again, this is a program that helps to bridge the gap between the income of the person living or working in the town and can help to really bridge that high cost of rent. In this case, and in most of the towns, there's up to a 3-year window. Our requirement, certainly when it's coming through Homeless Prevention Council, is that it's connected directly with case management services so that the town is assured that there's a case manager and a case management sort of process following people through the time that they start in the program, and then hopefully at some point are able to not need the resources. But we're then allowed to make sure that they're connected with any additional supports and services that are also helpful to stabilize housing and keep people here and local. So I would encourage you to think about offering something like this. To give you an example of usage, I would say, anywhere from 5 to 10 households in Eastham, Wellfleet, and Truro are using this annually. So, and that's per town, so anywhere from 5 to 10. So it's not necessarily a very large number or a astronomical number of funds, but it's a great resource to be able to offer. So we'd be happy to share more if you wanted to know more about it.
Do you know what Turo's base is? So if I recall correctly, or Wellfleet is, if you're a single person, it's up to $400, and then for each child, you have an additional amount. So does Turo do something similar?
Truro does something similar. I believe it's higher than Wellfleet. I think Wellfleet was closer to 300.
And is this something that's voted on at town meeting that's then put into a fund, or is this money that they're allocating from something specific?
This came through, I believe, the Affordable Housing Committee or Trust. I can go back and get all of those details and share them with you if you want to learn more with the specifics, but
You're saying
each
the
town's a
funding-
little bit different.
You're saying the funding came from the trust?
Yeah.
Or what came from the trust?
I'm not 100% sure where the actual funds are. It's either through the committee or the trust, is my understanding, but there may also be some CPC funds that connect in there. So let me get some details on that and get it back to you.
And do you know how much each town is allocating per year to this particular program?
I do not know the full number that's allocated. I just know that the amount varies per household.
Yeah.
And also varies based on AMI depending upon the town.
Right.
So, but we can share all that information. It's a little different
be
in
great.
all of these towns, but we'd be happy to share and then make also recommendations based on the reality of what we're seeing for people that walk through our door, for the 2,700 people that we see in and out of our
That
building.
would be very helpful, I
Yeah.
think, to whatever you can provide,
Happy to do that.
all of the background on that.
Right,
Yeah.
and I can certainly also then tell you more about
Great.
the, last year in Orleans, we served 97 households, so that was 175 people in total. We can really give you the breakdown of who might have been eligible. Again, likely to be a fairly small number after other resources they were connected to, but if that's another 5, 10 families that stay here, that makes a
Right.
big
Yeah.
difference.
Well, anything you can provide,
Yeah.
I think would be very.
Happy to do that.
Yeah.
Happy to.
Hadley, so just practically speaking, this provides a certain amount per household per month on how, for a year, from 5 years?
Up to 3 years in most of these programs. And again, that's if it's connected through case management, to be sure that eligibility is checked regularly and all of that. And I believe in these cases, the funds go directly to the landlord. So we, enter an arrangement and pay the landlord directly.
I like that.
Yeah, so it seems like another accessible, short-term way in which we could be offering some of those supports.
Great.
One of the things that I like about this, and actually going back to the ADU Resource Center, so much of our work is focused on developing affordable housing developments. And we're so concerned with AMI and all of the things that are in the regulations, which are cumbersome and take forever to implement. What I like about these things is that they're shorter range. Yes, they serve less people, fewer people, I should say. But with the ADU Center, you're not talking about AMI here. You're not and you are doing things to support landlords. So you're filling a niche, or niches, I should say, that haven't been in place before. And so
Right.
I think it's really creative, and I applaud both organizations for your work.
Thank you. We've really enjoyed working on this together, and I think, Terry and I really love talking about the fact that it's kind of that full gamut from housing development all the way then through the people, right? To your point, Fran, that we need to really focus on what we're doing to support the people that we need to keep here, so.
To add to what Fran has said, I also think that we've been talking about all of these things for a couple of years. What if we could do this? What if we could do that? But the missing piece was, how do we do that?
Right.
And how do we convince people that they would like to do this? And so I think that establishing this group of people with data, which is the one thing we need is data and other ideas, and also what's happening Cape-wide, I think maybe we'd be in a better position to argue the case in a more organized and intelligent manner. And that's why I invited you here today, because I've been watching this, and I really do believe that if we could get some information from you, we could take this to our town and hopefully fill this piece that we need to do.
Terrific.
So we would like to be in sort of quiet partnership with you at the moment, and maybe find some ways we could actually bring this to our town.
That would be wonderful. Great, thank you.
Anybody else?
Oh, excellent.
Thank you both, and
Thank you.
we'll look forward to more information.
Terrific.
All right.
All right,
Thank
great,
you.
thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Terry.
Take care.
All right. I think that's exciting.
It is.
Because I think, like I just said, that we've been trying to figure out how to do this. Other people are doing this. It's the next step.
I mean, I think Terry lightly touched on it, but there is a big gap with, how do you come up with initial costs? And what can the town do? And I think that's the hole that needs to be figured out. And I just keep going back to either the community preservation funds or short-term rental tax money, and how you can allocate that into sort of a new fund that the town could come up with that you could then utilize to help support housing.
I think we should work on this. At least we
I've
present our case anyway and see what happens.
Yeah.
So we're going to just sort of leave that right now, but I think we need all to give it a little time to think about this, also to see what other information we get back from them that we can share, and see what our next step might be.
Nancy, just a follow-up question that I just wrote a quick note about. I'm not sure I got this down right, but for people who own homes in Orleans, who don't live in them, and are possibly interested in renting them out on a year-round basis for affordable housing, is there a tax incentive for people now in Orleans? No.
No.
No, but there is in other towns. Yes. And is that something we should be?
That's a big vote.
Yeah.
That's a very contentious decision and discussion, and I know that there's a lot of towns that it's been presented to, and they're very hesitant to do that because it almost creates what some people perceive as a pit against year-round residents and then second homeowners, because basically what you're doing is you're not actually generating any funds. You're just offsetting the person who lives year-round to the person that owns a home, second home. So for example, 25% of your tax bill would be deducted if you were a year-round resident, but that means that tax money needs to then be placed on somebody else. And so in communities where you have, such a large division between, second homeowners and primary homeowners, it isn't that big of a difference for the second homeowner because it's adjusted slightly. But, if you're looking at a community that's like a 50-50 divide or, a different divide, but I'm not sure what Orleans' divide is, if we're at 60-40 or.
It's been
We're at 30.
53. It was 53 for a while, right? And
Yeah,
then
we're
back down
around
to
half and
52.
half.
Yeah,
Around half, little above,
It's
little
gone a
below
bit
from year to
changed a
year.
couple
So
of
you're not
percentages.
generating any funds.
I understand.
Yeah.
It's just, when we talk about a sort of immediate response to try and meet some needs, that seems like one of those ways to do it, if there was some incentive, and I think there probably would have to be
Maybe you could get some information about the programs if you're familiar with them and let us know.
Yeah, so the state allows you to go up to 35%, and most of the Outer Cape towns have capped it at 25%. And then essentially what it is, you know, again, it goes to the Board of Assessors, and the Board of Assessors bring it to the Select Board. The Select Board votes on it. You know, if you're doing 25%, easy numbers, you have a $4,000 tax bill, $1,000 deducted. That $1,000 then, though, gets distributed among people that own
They
second
don't
homes.
rent.
And, you know, one of the things that I've always said to people when they're in opposition to it is if you own a second home, you have the ability to rent that, and you have the ability to move out of it. And in a sense, a lot of times the year-round residents can't. And if you have a second home, you also have the ability to afford a second home. But there is a division that is created and a perception that is created by doing that. And so sometimes towns don't like to do that because they don't want people to feel like they're being,
That's in them,
yeah.
that's in them and us, yeah, right.
It's a highly
Yeah,
controversial
it is.
discussion.
Yeah, and I'm very for it. I grew up in Wellfleet where they do it. Provincetown does it. I have seen, you know, a lot of people utilize that. But I do understand where the second homeowners are coming from, and that is one of their biggest things that they talk about, is that they're, you know, picking up a larger percentage of the tax rate and all that kind of stuff. But they also tend to own the more expensive homes. And
Yeah.
so even without that, you know, there is that. But there is a misconception that it generates funds, and it doesn't. It just simply shifts.
Right, right.
So the tax coming in doesn't change. It's just more of a way to assist people that live year-round to help offset costs.
Right.
Is there, other than this group, is there any other town committee that would research that, or that would really fall in our laps? I mean, is this more of a finance committee kind of
I
exploration?
think we might need to bring George in or somebody like that to talk a little bit more. We've,
I think it's more of the assessor,
and planner
yeah.
changes.
Again, you know, it could ultimately affect a small number of families, but a small number of families is, that we could be helping is, so.
I think the
I
other
was
thing,
actually thinking about George for the ADU and the piece of work and some of the bylaws that we've put in place and the thinking we've done over the past to see maybe to move toward that. I believe this tax issue is almost a select board issue in terms of us not trying to, this has been going around for a while, and I don't necessarily feel comfortable being the starter of this public discussion. We could be a supporter of it if it came, but I sense this might be something to give back to the select board or the finance committee or the assessors, those people, because, but I, just because. But I think we have some other things that we might be able to get a little more information about and see if we can at least get the word out. We all believed that this ADU was going to be one of our helpful things, and the rental assistant was going to be helpful, and maybe we can find a way to do those things. So those would be our first steps. I would like to.
yeah, I think for the rental assistance, I mean, again, the way I look at it is the breakdown of where the short-term rental money's going. And how, and that, again, that is decided by the select board, but to look at it and say, is what the town of Orleans doing?
Isn't that the water, isn't that sewer? Isn't that going to sewer right now? I thought that was going to the sewer, but there's some other money coming through here for Opera too, so that maybe there'd be some other diversion. I think we should get some more information from Hadley and Terry and see, maybe we can come up with something you might bring to someone to talk about it further. So, anyway, it was a good beginning. All right, next on the agenda is reviewing the updated housing needs study. It was, at our last meeting, we talked about some changes. We sent them forward to Marcia. I shared them with Marcia. Marcia talked with Liz about them. And when you got your revised version, it looks pretty much very similar to the one that we sent out before. So I'm going to let Marcia give us a little background on that and see if we're ready to send this to the trust, or do we have more discussion? So how are you feeling, Marcia? Are you feeling better?
I'm feeling fine, but pardon me for sniffles and coughs as we go along, but generally I'm feeling fine.
Good.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm not sure how much detail you want to get into this. Maybe the overview being the memo from you to the trust board,
Okay.
sort of talking about the changes we made in response to their concerns. So we were offering them a member on the selection panel when we select a consultant. And then we were saying we would have 3 joint meetings throughout the life of this project to look at the deliverables that seem to have some implications for policy particularly. So that's all laid out, and that's the, I think that's, I forget whether we have ever talked about them, but basically it's for deliverable number 3, the housing stock goals, deliverable number 4, the 10-year plan for production, and deliverable number 5, that's the plan for updates and reports. Other than that, I've made only some explanatory changes, trying to get a little bit more detail about what might be added or gotten to. I do want to emphasize that task 1 and the deliverable related to task 1 is the actual plan for data collection. So a lot of the work on task 1 is to figure out what data exists, in what form, how easy it is to get, where we're missing data, where we might need collection of new primary data. So a lot of that work involves discussion with the consultant on the best way to get the most data that we would need for the analysis. So it doesn't specify exactly what data is derived from what source. It's asking the consultant to look at the full array of sources and then come back with a plan that maximizes that availability. So I did want to emphasize that for task 1. I don't know, other questions that you may have on the scope of work or on the memo? I think that's better for me to approach it that way rather than going into page by page discussion.
Marcia, just a couple questions. On the consultant selection, you still, in bold, say can add 1 member of the Affordable Housing Trust Board. I thought we discussed adding 1, or is that still open?
I think
For
we discussed it
discussion.
was okay. They had to come to a decision if they wanted to be on that.
Oh.
I guess we're offering them the opportunity, correct?
Right, and if they say they would want it, then we would write it in as such.
Oh, okay, all right. The
I
other,
posed it more as a question because I have no idea whether they want that or not.
right. The other question, we did talk about using, and I'm reading from the minutes, using the state's definition throughout the report, affordable workforce housing and market rate, rather than specifying AMI. But it appears we're still referencing AMI. So,
Yeah, and I did talk to Liz about it, and I don't know if Liz has any more she wants to say about it. My point is that on the data collection, you're collecting data about people's income. Then depending on the source, they aggregate it. They put it in intervals, they put it in categories, etc. And that's what the data collection is. I think over time, there might be adjustments on definitions and programs. For example, as I understand the state workforce housing program, it can go from 80% to 120%, but it could be 110%. It could be any number of things. Market rate doesn't have an income definition, except I think it's also related to whether there's a commitment to remain affordable or not. So there's some variations in the state programs. But I think the primary issue is the data collection is based on income. So they actually ask people their income. So for example, the intermediate updates for data would be the American Community Survey done by the Census Bureau, which they do every year. And then they do 3 or 5 year averages over periods of time. They ask for information about what exactly is your income. Then they put it in intervals, either dollar intervals or something related to that, which then various people take and translate into percent of percent of AMI or other ways of manipulating the data. But the base data is income. So, I mean, we can definitely, and we can talk to the consultant about it, and we can label certain groups of people as being income eligible for certain programs. Of course, there's more to eligibility than income, and that will vary by household size, et cetera, et cetera. So I didn't want to presume that we'd actually collect data that say immediately or primarily that that person is eligible for affordable housing, community housing.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Any other, Fran?
Marcia, I like this. It's an advancing. We've been working with you, and you've been wonderful in bringing us together for a long time. And I think the addition on the accommodation of the concerns of the Affordable Housing Trust are nicely woven into this. So I'm good with it.
Any other comments, questions? If you could put into one sentence, what is the good of having this study done right now, at this point in time in our project, what would you say? I know you have COVID, but I just was giving you, I'm just thinking, in terms of, we just talked about the fact that we have all these projects coming up. We have a lot of things happening right now. We're also not addressing a lot what's happening, what we can do right now. We're trying to find some short-term addressing as well. If you were going to say why, I know why we started this process, and I know why it's valuable in a lot of ways, but what are we really trying to do with this study?
Well, I will say, I don't think the data, people say, oh, it's 2017, it's old. In the world of data collection, the 2010 census, the 2020 census, that's just a fact of life. And we've lived with that for a long time. I don't think it's that old, and to the extent that it's altered, it's probably gotten worse in terms of inequality. So I think the value is less in updating it, because we can update it in any number of ways, as one, focus in on what are the key indicators we want to track over time. The study in 2017 gave you every chart, every table you could possibly ask for, but this would focus it in a little bit more on a housing need indicator. So I think that's one thing. But the thing that concerns me, and I'm a little unsure what we're going to get from consultants, is the lack of any data, for example, on income of workers who work in Orleans but don't live in Orleans. There's some information from the census on commuting patterns, but we don't know how many people work here who would live here if they could possibly access appropriate housing. So I think that's a major gap in a lot of the analyses, because all the analyses are based on census and other sources that ask for the characteristics of current residents. So I think to the extent that we can get some indication of non-resident needs that we would want to accommodate, because, for example, they work here, or they send their kids to school here, or those kinds of categories, that I think that would be very valuable. And that we have to see how easy and how much it costs for a consultant to get that kind of data. I have in mind a survey of town employees and a survey of school employees. I'm not sure how big a deal that would be. That's very doable. When I talk about a survey of all labor, of all the labor force in the town, that might be a little more difficult to do, but to the extent we can get some information, or at least some sample data from which we can extrapolate, I think that would be very helpful. And then the last piece is that the data that we got from the 2017 study doesn't give us sort of the fine-grained nature of the needs. So, for example, we have a huge homeowner need, but it's not clear from the study what is the nature of that homeowner need. Is it lack of money? Is it lack of alternatives for downsizing? What is it that is the need? So therefore, what strategies would work for homeowners in need? So I think it's really the data gaps that I am most interested in and hoping that this can get at.
Fran?
I think some of the other pieces of information that are outlined here is for some sort of community conversation about, or study, or information about what is the right balance of the different kinds of housing stock that we need in Orleans? How do we want it to look in our future? What is the nature of the kind of housing stock we should be promoting, be it affordable or missing middle income, or what type of houses, larger or smaller? There's all kinds of ways that we can anticipate what we would like to have, and I think some of that is included in here as well.
Okay.
Marcia, regarding the collection of some of that more challenging data, do you foresee a consultant, for instance, working with the Chamber of Commerce to sort of tap into a lot of local businesses in terms of sort of surveying employees, that kind of thing, too?
Right, exactly. And I don't know enough about, it's not an easy thing to get at every worker in the town, so I'm not sure how it would be. I assume many employers would be interested in participating because many of them are coming out and saying there's not sufficient housing. But we would have to work through the chamber, through groups of the businessmen. A lot of the businessmen have shown up over the last year or two saying how much they need worker housing. So in that case, can we quantify that? Would you be willing to talk to your fellow business people and say, would you participate in a survey? And obviously we would have to design it so that it has confidential data generated and what kinds of questions we would ask. You'd always a balance between being too intrusive but getting the kind of income information you need. So there's obviously an art to that kind of data collection, and hopefully people in this town would be interested in the answers so they would cooperate with the gathering of that data.
And I assume the consultant will give us an idea of how we can go about doing that. That would be,
Right.
so,
And the cost, because I'm guessing that we can do it, but I really don't know for sure how much it would cost. And so there might be some choices. So maybe we end up just with town and school employees, and then we extrapolate from that based on average wage, or whether or not we could, their numbers in terms of how many laborers we have, but not too many in terms of how many laborers. Well, we do know how many work and live in Orleans, but we don't know too much about those who don't live in Orleans.
Isn't the town workforce income information public?
The town government?
Yeah.
Yeah. Then the question that we don't have, or at least I haven't seen a compilation, is what's the household size attached to an income?
Gotcha.
So
Yeah.
there's a lot of presumption that if you have a primary wage earner that earns under 80% of AMI, the household would be or would not be. But there's quite a bit of variation, as you know, between a one-person household and a six-person household.
Interesting.
So to connect those pieces of data so that you can make some presumptions about eligibility for various programs is the issue.
Susan,
If you don't- This might be a crazy question, but if a consultant sort of said, for this amount of money, this is the kind of survey I can do to collect some of this data, but I can guide you on how to do your own surveys, let's say with Chamber of Commerce, businesses and stuff, for us to carry out, would that be nuts?
I would hesitate because there's a lot of private information being asked for. You have to decide whether you need a sample survey and in which case what kind. I'm not a statistician, but I know just a little bit enough to know that can get complicated, as well as how the whole thing is carried out, I think is very important.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
I would think
I would-
we'd need
I wouldn't
guidance from a
wanna-
consultant, for instance, but
Yeah.
it seems like it could be.
Well, actually, we need the work from a consultant because I'm not gonna do it, so.
Yeah. Okay. Crazy idea, I guess.
Good thinking now.
I think this is a big piece of what we've been trying to do for a while. I don't think it's the only piece, and I think we probably should make a motion to send this on to the trust at this point, and hopefully they will agree with, the changes we've made and support that. And then I think we have to be really cognizant of when we interview these consultants, that we really know what we're looking for, and we're not just going to get a lot more data that is interesting, but not going to move us toward our goal. And I think that's the piece that I'm sort of holding out on until we actually take this to the next level. There's been real support for this from the trust to have, and from the finance committee and other people wanting more data. But I really want data that's going to help us go forward, and not just to say, now we've collected more data, now what do we do? I want to know what we want to do, and then hopefully the data will support it when we find it out. But may I take a motion to see if we want to send this on to the trust at this point?
I move to move this proposal on to the trust.
Second?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so 2, 3, 4, 5, 0, 0. So, Marcia, we have the letter, we have the, this RFP, so I'm going to allow you to send that on to the trust, and hopefully they'll take it up at their next meeting, and we get this moving.
Will do.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I
Thank you so
appreciate-
much.
Thank you.
Thank you
I appreciate
for all
your
your
work
work.
on this.
Good work, Marcia.
Okay, and this should be shorter, Marcia. Update on the housing website, which is still hanging out there, but we're trying to work on that too.
Yeah, we're a little stalled on that. But this is what I've talked to Nancy about, and I've come up with a new strategy. Getting this subcommittee together has been well nigh impossible. And so what I suggest is, rather than we have decision by committee, that we take it in a more sequential mode. So what I'm suggesting is that I work with Nancy and Fran, who were appointed by this committee to be the members of that subcommittee, to work on revisions to the Affordable Housing Committee webpage and frame it in a way we think it makes sense in the context of the overall organization of information on the website around housing. I think, hopefully all of you know that what I was looking for is, at this point, a housing landing page in which anybody who asks for information or searches on the town website for affordable housing would land on this landing page. And so what I've been working with the subcommittee on is what that landing page looks like, how it relates to the already existing pages for the committee and for the trust board. So one of the things that I've been working with first Sarah and now Mia about is how to make the data repository behind all of that work. And not going into any technical details, it's a little cumbersome at this point. So I want to work with Nancy and Fran with to revise the Affordable Housing Committee page, as well as comment on where I think we should go with the landing page, and that to the extent that looks all right, we make some alterations in what is now the landing page, which I should mention is existent. That is, you can get to it if you have the correct link, but it's what they call not front facing. In other words, a member of the public can't just go there. And work with Mia and make it look like I think it makes sense and that works, and then go to the trust and ask them if they would do the similar thing with the trust board website. And by the way, what do you think about the housing landing page? And sort of do a sequential decision making and move the process along in a more steady manner. So that's my idea here. And I will emphasize, and I did this in the beginning, this is to not create very much more new content. It is basically to organize what's already out there on our website, but much of which is out of date or is not explained in any way. So when you go on a search on the town website and ask for something specific, you might end up with a 30-page PDF as opposed to another link, or as opposed to any number of things. So I'm writing a little bit of explanatory text so that when you land somewhere, you sort of know where you're going. But other than that, I'm not creating new content. So if we are successful in this organizational effort, then the next stage is to decide what new content we need and to have volunteers to provide that new content. So that's sort of my strategy for moving forward on this so that we can make incremental progress, but on a steady basis.
And Fran, do you think we could commit to doing that this month?
I
coming
think we
month?
can.
I think we really need to. I haven't been, I've had to drop the ball on that one, but I think I'm coming back a little bit. And I think Fran and I will commit to getting this ready, so we'll have something to show at the November meeting, at least for, hopefully for our page.
Sure.
And we will do that, correct? I really, I don't, I'm not a box checker. I like things to be done well and completed, but I also would like us to check off some of these boxes as well, and so we can get on with the next thing. So, anyway, any other comments about the website? And the next topic is, I sent you out the Governor Prince redevelopment plan, which was quite comprehensive, and there's going to be a meeting, October 19th, and that's presented, is that still correct date, presented to the Select Board? But I feel that we, as affordable housing people, need to also be on board with this as well, and have some, I'd let Fran do a little bit of over-discussion. I have a couple of comments I would like to share, but I'll let you do yours first, and then I didn't print out the whole thing, but I did print out the recommendations to the Select Board, which seems where you're going for this meeting. So maybe if we could sort of start with that and where you think you're going with this. And I know you gave us this information at our last meeting a little bit in the
And I
heads
think
up.
it helps to say it again, and for our benefit and for the benefit of the public listening in. This is going to be an ongoing conversation, as there's not a vote coming up on this right at this point in time, but this is a long-range plan. The Governor Prince Planning Committee is winding up its work and will be sunset. The meeting that we will have with the Select Board on October 19th will be a combined meeting of the Governor Prince Planning Committee, the Affordable Housing Trust, that makes decisions about this property along with the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Selectmen. So we are on the agenda for that October 19th meeting. So basically, there are 5 recommendations, and I'll just do them very briefly. But the committee is recommending that the entire 5.5 acre Governor Prince site should be devoted to housing uses. We had looked at, evaluated, and discussed extensively other possibilities, and there were no proposals coming forward, and there was no other need that seemed as pressing as the housing. So we basically voted to go ahead with having the entire property used for housing. Secondly, who should the housing be for? And we're recommending that it's primarily affordable housing that will qualify for the state low-income tax credit programs. In addition to that, it's large enough, because it's up to 77 units we're recommending, it's large enough to perhaps incorporate some additional flexibility that would allow for some missing middle housing. So whether that can be accomplished financially, with financing plans being as difficult as they are, is yet to be seen, but we're hoping that the RFP will be written in a flexible enough way that potential developers can be creative in their responses. We would want, this is a high priority of the group, that the development be attractive, that it can be consistent with our community character, be environmentally responsible, and really be a long-term asset for Orleans. In terms of density, as I suggested, we are recommending that we allow for development up to the zoning level, which allows for 77 units on that site. And that is using the 14 units per acre zoning allowance in our downtown area. So yes, this should be pretty much covered in our zoning, but there may be some allowances for variances because probably there would be a 40B project involved, and there might be some allowances for reduced parking, for example, or the number of units in a building, things like that that could be brought to the various boards that will be reviewing the project ultimately. Number 5, we're hoping for a really livable neighborhood that will provide some privacy, will be attractive and connected to the rail trail for residents, and will have an attractive front on Route 6A, so that this is a neighborhood that we hope can be built in such a way as creating a sense of place for the people who live there. When our consultants came back at our last meeting, we were talking about implementation strategies moving forward. And they recommended 2 recommendations that we had not necessarily heard before. And one was to consider the issuance of a request for expressions of interest, an RFI. And basically, the committee supported this idea of before now and through the winter, we request this RFI to hear from developers the answers to specific questions that would enhance their ability to respond to our RFP. How do we structure our RFP that is welcoming and takes into account the developers' needs and wishes? Because we really want to have some good responses to this RFP. So the RFI will be structured in a way with specific questions, and hope that we will get some responses to that. Another recommendation from our consultants was the idea of having an overlay, new 40R overlay district. And that would have been something that the planning board would do, and they may well consider this. We were not necessarily recommending this go forward. A 40R would be an increase in density that we're not looking for. It would increase the density at this particular site from 14 units per acre to 20 units per acre, and that's not necessarily something that we were recommending. And I think that the committee also felt that going for a bylaw change in zoning would be very hard to explain, would be a cumbersome process, and might croak the project.
What particular bylaw change were you looking to implement?
40R.
What does that mean?
40R would be an overlay district on this particular piece of property that would increase the density, and the consultant that we were not asking for, and the consultant recommendation would be that because they were recommending it, I think, to avoid any future suits that could be brought against the project because we're up against, it would make the umbrella wider and would allow for things that we are not necessarily wanting to do, but might invite lawsuits against the project. So I can't say that I'm really particularly clear about that, and I'm certainly not explaining it well. But I think that that's a planning committee issue, but from what we understood of it, we were not eager to move forward with it. So that's just included in our report. And so that's basically it. Marcia, you may well have some things that you would like to add to that.
Well, let me just mention the 40R is allowed by state statute and is to encourage apartment development. And the major issue is that it allows that kind of density in apartments by right. So it's permitted by right. So it's not any special permitting. And that's what's subject to somebody questioning the basis for the entity giving a special permit. So this is all part of the consultant's recommendations to try to increase the predictability of the end result by making it easier for whatever developer we do engage to go forward with the project and get all permits in hand and not be subject to legal challenge. So that was the purpose of 40R, but it's not necessarily a slam dunk kind of zoning bylaw, and it would have to go to town meeting.
And I think that the committee really wants to have the oversight over this development. For example, the Architecture Review Committee and other committees that we would have in the review. And if this was in place, it's, as Marcia says, it's by right, we wouldn't have that internal control, so.
You don't have to take all their recommendations.
No.
You consult.
No.
That's say that's one
No,
you don't
they've
need.
done very good, helpful work for us, and hopefully we have built upon it in a reasonable way. And so we're excited about moving forward, and we're looking forward to that meeting on October 19th.
I have a couple of questions, though, in terms of, the ownership piece is sort of an afterthought a little bit in this thing, and my question is, why is that? Because I think when we first started looking at this piece of property, we thought it had some abilities. Part of our charge from the last study was to have 15 home ownership kind of properties as well as the 85 rentals. That was one of our initial recommendations that was accepted, and I'm curious as to why. I'm curious how much time has been spent on how many more rentals we need at this space versus some ownership possibilities, maybe some homes, maybe some places for families. We talk about families all the time, and then we add 1 or 2, 3-bedroom apartments at all these, and maybe 1 or even 2, which are not suitable for families, most families. And I feel that this piece of property, one of the reasons we supported it initially was it had a variety of possibilities and where it's located. And you could comment on terms of the neighborhood, that would help with the neighborhood concept. I am really concerned about the 3 stories. I understand that the Governor Prince Committee wanted to get the biggest bang for their buck and get as much thing on that property as possible, but I don't think anyone's really done a project, a picture to see what a 3-story building is going to look like on that property and how the density is going to work. So my comment is the 3 stories bothers me a bit for that particular location, and the aside to the home ownership also bothers me a little bit in terms of, and I may come to that other meeting and say that again, but I really feel we have to look at our rental needs. I think we don't want to have, I think we want to have rentals in this town, but I think most people in this town live in homes. And most of our people who are supporting this live in homes. And I think it is sort of a little short-sighted in some ways for us to think that home ownership isn't wanted by a lot of more people than we think. And I think that that's something that we need to consider in terms of the future. In this, we don't have another big piece of land in Orleans at this point in time that could have homes on it that we could help with. There's nothing. We can't find a place for our municipal buildings. So I'm not thinking that in the near future we're going to have a place with some home ownership. So I would recommend in part of this discussion that becomes a little bit more upfront in the discussion. I would definitely go and support that someplace else. third point was, your committee is sunsetting. Who will carry forth these ideas?
The Board of Selectmen and the Affordable Housing Trust.
And will there be, and there'll be opportunities for the community to also come back in and the,
I'm sure.
so,
They will make the decision about how to move this forward, but clearly it's an important decision.
okay.
May I respond to?
Yes, Nancy?
Yes,
Go ahead, Marcia.
Marcia?
I did want to say that the committee talked a lot about what kind of home, apartments, rental, home ownership. The end product does not prohibit home ownership.
I
As a matter of
understand
fact, the committee made it clear that this proposal can include market rate housing and/or home ownership. I think what the committee found in the options as they worked with the consultant is that home ownership, one, is significantly more expensive in terms of subsidy per unit. And two, they did come up with an option and had talked to Habitat for Humanity about doing a portion of the site as home ownership. If we did that, we probably would need to subdivide that portion out. It would complicate the project, but not make it impossible. So part of what we need to do, and I think it could be part of the RFI process, is to ask developers, is home ownership a viable financial option when you're talking about committed, affordable home ownership as opposed to market rate home ownership? So I think that's part of the question we have to ask and see what developers are willing to do and what the market is for rental versus home ownership.
Thank you. I just wanted to put it on the table. And so I appreciate that.
Thank you, Marcia, because that is a good answer to that question. I could speak a moment about the idea about 3 stories. Old Colony Way apartments have 3 stories. And this site is really unique in its topography because there are plateaus and then different levels. And so it would be very inconspicuous in a way to site a taller building on the lower area of the back area of the site, specifically because of the topography there. So it could be a really creative way to use that topography. It's an unusual site in that way.
I was actually thinking whether or not we could do 4 stories. So I have the opposite concept, and the same thing is that property dips down. So, if you wanted the front part of the property to be less in your face, you could do the typical 2 stories, and then the back where it like literally drops. You could potentially have the 4 stories, and I've seen that happen in an area where they did development and they didn't level the land. They actually built the housing around sort of the dips and rises, and so the tops of the houses were all the same, and then it actually allowed for some of the units to be entered on one level, and then you had 2 full stories entering out the other level, and so it would allow, almost like a much larger, units and things like that.
Okay.
I don't think separating the project, and I think I agree with her, would complicate things, and if you are going to do home ownership, you would have to subdivide the property, and then once you subdivide the property, your density levels go down. And I do think there are other homeowner opportunities that have existed in the past that, you occasionally will see. I think in the last 3 years, I've seen 3 homes in Orleans come up for resale through HAC. I watch those things. I think they're interesting. And 2 of the homes were behind the car wash, like that whole development back there, if I recall correctly, is affordable housing homeowner. And then one of the homes was in the development that you guys did behind the One Stop Oil Change. That's also a home, right? That's a owner?
One, isn't it?
No, it's 2 different ones. One of them is, one of them's off,
Right.
one of them's off Baker Pond and one of them's off.
Right, okay. All right, well, I think,
It's interesting how, you think about these things, but
Well, that's one of the reasons that we wanted to leave recommending that the RFP be written in a really flexible way that would allow for the creativity of developer who has to deal with their finances and how they put a project together. So we were really hoping for some creative uses on the site and some creative uses in terms of a mix of income and people who could live there.
All right, well, you've done a good job.
A
and-
quick question regarding Governor Prince. So our last meeting, Elizabeth, you raised the issue of town ownership. And doesn't appear to be something that was discussed as part of the redevelopment plan. Maybe it wasn't on their agenda,
Oh, no,
but-
we did discuss that.
You did?
Oh, we spent a lot of time discussing that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And is that just not on the table?
No, it is on the
Oh, it
table.
is.
It's
I'm sorry.
included. Yeah.
Town ownership of the property?
Oh, town ownership. I'm
what I
sorry, I didn't hear you. It can be done in one of two ways. We can sell the property to a developer to own it and build it and manage it and carry it forward, or we can do a 99-year lease. And so that's one of the questions that I think will be in the RFI. The committee didn't feel qualified to offer an opinion about that, but the RFI will provide an opportunity to ask developers whether or not they have a preference one way or the other. So there are two ways to go.
All right, Bill, do you have something to say?
No, I was looking down the table.
She's not going to bite, are you?
No, I thought she was going to bite on
Didn't
that.
help you, did it?
No, because I don't think either of those options are things that I would choose to do if I had the option.
Marcia, go ahead. I hear your hand.
I feel like there's
sorry.
kind of this elephant in the room.
It is an
around
elephant
this
in the
room.
issue, and
What is the benefit of the town owning it?
So I look at it like a capital project, which is very different, I guess.
Right.
And the way I view the development of this property, that would be extremely unique. If you're doing a 99-year lease, you are potentially handing over ownership, even though, yes, I understand it is a 99-year lease, and the concept is in 100 years, we would get it back. But it's a 99-year lease, it's 100 years. None of us will be around when it comes back. If you do the home ownership, again, you're handing it over. With Harbor Hill, it was a special legislation act that was done at a special meeting vote in the town of Provincetown in 2017. The town owns it. That is town property. Yes, it was already a developed property. It was a foreclosed property. We went through the process of purchasing the property through the land court. We don't manage the rentals. Those are managed by the CDP, but it is a town-owned property. The rental income is written to the town of Provincetown. Sort of the trust has the flexibility to go in and make changes. One of the things that they're looking at right now is whether or not they can redevelop some of the units from 2 bedrooms to one bedrooms, because in Provincetown, the 1-bedroom units are what we're looking for. I look at this as an opportunity to do something very unique, and that, yes, you'd be going out to developers, and yes, you'd be having them submit sort of plans to develop the property, but the difference would be is they'd be giving you a price of what it would cost the town voters to develop the property, and the town would maintain ownership of that property, and it would allow you to then, as a town, and whichever trust is running it, because you would have to do a special trust to do this, would be able to put stipulations onto certain units that we are never going to be able to do, including having them be municipal units, or, whatever sort of some of the things that you want to create that you can't create when you hand it over to somebody else, if you maintained ownership of that property. You could still do the 25%, 80% AMI, you could still do 30%, 100%, you could still do, 10%, 120, and then you could actually have units that would be specifically for some of your municipal employees. So I did look at the town website today. I was very curious to see what we pay for a principal clerk. And the reason why I was looking at that is in your thing that we were sent, there's a breakdown of money and incomes, and it talks about, what people are getting paid and all that kind of stuff. So we did talk about teachers, firefighter, staff librarian, police officers, but your principal clerk at the DPW starting salary is $50,000. So we have a lot of these jobs that we are posting, that we're bringing in for, that, you know, are kind of going to be out of these ranges that we're talking about. So they will qualify maybe the first 2 years working for the town as a single person, as low income 80%. But once they go over $54,000, they don't qualify anymore. And that's all within your report. If you're going to get hired as the assistant town planner and you're a single person, you don't qualify to go into 80% AMI housing. So these are jobs that currently exist, and in 5 years, their salaries will be higher, and in 5 years, this project will be complete. And so how does the town take a project and do something very unique and create something that benefits the town, not just for housing needs, but also for their own functionality of the town? We have a 7-mile radius restriction on our firefighters. It's part of the union contracts. Where are we going to house them? And so, in a weird way, I don't see those two I see the two options. I think they are two options, but I do think there's a third option. And I do think it's going to be a much harder sell, and I understand that. But I also think that we are in a community during a time frame where every single person talks about housing and the need for housing and what can we do for housing. And I think that you would be surprised the support that you would get at town meeting if we came up with a very different idea and presented it and asked them to fund a project that would provide 77 units of year-round housing for people in the town of Orleans and the employees, you know, that are going to be coming in and working in the town of Orleans. So that's my elephant in the room, and that's my crazy idea.
And you speak it
It's okay.
very clearly
I appreciate it.
and passionately.
Those are the things that I'm looking at and going onto the websites and looking at and pulling from.
Well, I would like Marcia to respond to that, but I have two things. I mean, you're talking about people who might not be qualified for subsidized housing. You're talking
Correct.
about the missing middle people, and we spent a lot of time in our committee discussion talking about the missing middle. It's one of the reasons we wanted to leave our RFP flexible.
Right.
So that a developer might provide some housing that was not the subsidized housing per se,
Yeah.
but to provide some housing at a somewhat higher level of income that could be committed. And in order to do that, they might have to provide some higher-end units or units for sale or some other mechanism to help them finance that. It's very tricky. It's not at all clear whether or not a developer can do that.
Right.
On the other hand, Provincetown has set up a situation where they have an entirely separate trust. And these are units that they own and they manage, or they contract with CDP to manage. They've been, as you know, really expensive. I believe, how much was the original outlay of money for that project?
So that project, they voted to allocate $12 million to the trust.
$12 million.
And the purchase price, I think, was around 8-something. And then that was a much older building.
Right.
So there were repairs. So it is a slightly different situation because you were purchasing something that was already constructed, also knowing it was 27 years old, also knowing, you know, there's going to be updates and things like that. That's slightly different because they were purchasing an already existing thing versus building something for the needs of the town. So there is slight differences, and I totally understand that. And I do know it is not going to be the easier path to go. It would be multiple levels of creation. Yes, yeah, very aware.
But you bring up a really important point that was discussed with the Governor Prince committee, is the ability to provide some more flexible housing that is going to answer a different need
Yep.
than the housing focus that we've had in this group, which has been the subsidized affordable housing. And the trust is beginning to talk about whether or not they want to, our affordable housing trust, whether or not they want to consider setting up a different income stream to the trust to allow for the creation of a different level of housing.
Right.
Now, it could not come through the Affordable Housing Committee income sources. It would have to be a separate income source. And I would hope that along the way, our committee can talk about whether or not we want to talk about, think about, recommend going forward in some sort of way to expand the kind of housing that may come forward in our data collection as a significant need, and what are the mechanisms that we can use to do that. That probably the Governor Prince property is not going to be in that situation because it would take a significant time to kind of incorporate that new idea. But it's not an idea that we should dismiss. It's an idea that is really ripe for further conversation, I think.
All right. It's close to 6
Okay.
o'clock,
Thank
and
you.
I think at this meeting, we have thrown out a lot of extremely interesting ideas, and I hope someone else is listening besides us, because I think there's a lot to be considered. There's some creativity going on here, and the bottom line is, the need is there, and as many ideas as we can come up with is maybe make into a reality is what our job is right now.
Right.
So, thank you all for your input, and to be continued. Can I have a motion to approve the September 6th minutes?
So move.
Second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Our next meeting is Tuesday, November 1st at 4:30 PM, but I would encourage all of us to watch or attend the October 19th meeting of the Governor Prince Select Board, Affordable Housing Trust Board meeting to find out what's going on, and there's always public comment.
It would be wonderful to have some of our group there at this meeting on the 19th.
Yeah, I plan to be there.
Oh, I need to be there? So I don't know, did you want me to give you my potential items, if we could potentially talk about them next meeting?
And
I had two specific kind of things that I thought would be a good, because I know they're not on the agenda, and I think we could discuss them further, but with George, it would be the bylaws, specifically ADU, height, mixed-use residential, commercial, and density.
I do have that one down.
And then the other one is a finance, and I'm not sure if we would talk to the finance director or the finance committee about it, but I would like to know what the restrictions on the community preservation funds are, specifically for rental assisting program and buy-down programs for housing. And then I would like to know where the short-term rental tax is going and how that's divided up, and whether or not there is any of that money being specifically given to housing.
I think the answer is no, but I think we can actually find out those two.
Well,
And then
we
it
want to find
wasn't,
funding sources.
it wasn't that we hadn't considered it prior to this, but it went to Suez, right?
Just kind of depends what pocket you want to put your money in.
Yes.
So, thank you for that, and I appreciate everybody's input and concern for this important project.
Want a
So,
motion to adjourn?
motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you.